Hi everyone, so I promised a shorter video and this one will definitely be shorter, okay? So now we're just going to look at some of those environmental impacts that we need to get those specific chemical equations locked down for and the right terminology to be able to use when we're answering questions. So let's have a look. We're going to focus primarily on fossil fuels here, remembering that we should be able to contrast this with our biofuels and other renewables as well. So with this, we're looking at the environmental reasons for reducing our dependence on fossil fuels. We've talked about energy. We've talked about simply the fact that they're getting close to running out. Now we're going to look at the negative environmental impact of these fuels and why it will be good to reduce this. So we've talked about there being limited supplies. Fossil fuels are the source of raw materials for many other products of the chemical industry. So it's not just fuels, including plastics, paints, pharmaceuticals. A lot of our raw materials in terms of organic compounds are obtained through fossil fuels. Okay, so this is something to keep in mind. If we can reduce our reliance on those for fuels, then we still have more of them available for things that we may not have alternatives to yet. The combustion process, as we know, produces both CO2 and H2O. Both of these are greenhouse gases. We tend to, in the media, focus on carbon dioxide, but water is also a greenhouse gas. So water vapor will also trap heat inside our atmosphere. So don't forget that. If you're talking about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, you need to remember that water is also one. When we come to talking about whether or not some of the other fuel types produce greenhouse gases, a lot of people tend to forget about this guy. So they'll say no greenhouse gases emitted even if water is being produced, and that's not right. VCAR will punish you for that. Okay, so water is a greenhouse gas. It doesn't have other issues such as acid rain or ocean acidification, but it does trap heat in our atmosphere. The combustion of fossil fuels also produces SO2, which leads to acid rain formation in this sequence of reactions here. Sulfur reacts to form SO2, so this is often in the burning of sulfur, so in the combustion process first. Once SO2 is produced, it will further react with oxygen in the atmosphere, okay, producing SO3. SO3 is then soluble in water. It ionizes in the water to further reacts with water to produce sulfuric acid. The key thing here is to remember that the oxides of sulfur are acidic, and through a series of reactions will produce H2SO4, sulfuric acid. Okay, the oxides of nitrogen are also acidic and they will produce nitric acid. Okay, which is HNO3. Okay. The other thing is thermal pollution of waterways caused by the cooling water from the coal-fired power stations. In our previous video, we looked at the structure of coal-fired power stations and how it requires transferring thermal energy into water. A lot of that water is dumped into lakes and reservoirs around a power station, and this can cause what we call thermal pollution. It causes the temperature of the water to rise, which reduces the solubility of CO2 and O2 in the waterways, remembering that aquatic plants still require CO2 in order to photosynthesize, and of course fish and other organisms require dissolved oxygen in order to breathe. So by diminishing the solubility of these gases in the waterways, we can destroy aquatic ecosystems. When we're talking about the greenhouse effect or climate change, okay, so we talk about climate change as a result of the enhanced greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect keeps us alive. It is what keeps our planet at a livable temperature. However, the enhanced greenhouse effect is the accelerated warming and increased warming due to a buildup of gases which absorb more of the sun's radiation. So in the initial greenhouse effect, solar radiation comes in, warms our planet, and a majority of it is reflected out. So some heat escapes and some is trapped by the greenhouse effect. The enhanced greenhouse effect means that more of it is trapped inside. As more heat is trapped inside, the temperature increases. This is done by a number of different outputs of modern society. So large scale farming, large scale for rice and animals, the use of fertilizers, combustion engines, coal, oil, petrol, electricity power plants, and use of different chlorofluorocarbons and other propellants in our gas, in things like deodorants and things like that where we have propellants. So if we look at the carbon dioxide emissions per gram of fuel, and this is one to note, this is from your textbook. If we have a look here, we can see that the carbon emissions on coal for the mass of CO2 emitted per gram of fuel is 3.7. Okay, so per megajoule of energy is 93. For natural gas, we're going to have less per megajoule of energy. If we look at ethanol, we actually still have quite a large amount of CO2 for megajoule of energy produced, remembering that ethanol and our biofuels will have a lower energy density than our fossil fuels, so we need to burn more of them for the same amount of energy. But burning more of them will release more CO2. This is something to consider when we discuss the carbon neutral or the carbon neutrality of biofuels versus fossil fuels. So here is a quick multiple choice question. This is from the 2011 VCAR exam, so in the previous study design, but it is still relevant to what we need to understand here. This one is on biogas, so we're talking about a biofuel, and it can be generated as a byproduct of many farming activities. So it's being used as waste. Wastewaters often contain sugars such as glucose that can be converted into methane. A simplified reaction sequence is given below. You should make note of the fermentation process in your notes, okay? You do need to be able to write the equation for the fermentation of glucose. After fermentation, it is oxidized into, you'll notice, ethanoic acid here. So this is a redox reaction. The acid is then neutralized with the weak base, and we come through to the bacterial conversion then into methane here for the production of biogas. So the ratio of the volume of methane produced to the volume of carbon dioxide produced, okay, is we are seeing we have 2 methane being produced for each 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 is to 4, simplified down into 1 is to 2. So the answer is going to be B. There we go. Okay, so here's the other emissions that we need to consider. So you should make a note: sulfur dioxide, our nitrous and nitrogen dioxide are the ones that lead through to acid rain. Okay, these are also key components of smog and air pollution, which can cause respiratory problems, which we know China monitors its air quality a lot, and that is due to the presence of these and other organic chemicals. Okay. Ozone, we all know we have a hole in the ozone layer. Ozone in the lower parts of the atmosphere is actually pollution, and we get a reaction between nitrogen oxides that react with oxygen to produce ozone, and in the lower atmosphere this can cause respiratory problems. Of course, particulates from incomplete combustion, okay, which, as we know from the bushfires, any small particulates can be very harmful to our respiratory system. Of course, carbon monoxide, if we're talking about 30% efficiency in our engines, we know they're not going to be burning using complete combustion, so we see the production of carbon monoxide, the silent killer. Carbon monoxide binds more strongly to our hemoglobin than oxygen, so our body can't actually oxygenate the blood properly if we are breathing in carbon monoxide. So these are the key emissions. So when we're talking about whether or not the environmental impact of a fuel, these are all the different emissions that we can be talking about in order to weigh up whether one fuel is better than another. Does the fuel, such as a fossil fuel, contain trace amounts of sulfur, nitrogen, and that will go on to cause nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxides, and ozone? Will it burn cleanly? These kinds of things you need to be asking yourself when doing the comparisons to these fuels. With acid rain, we talked about before, acid rain occurs when we have nitrogen oxides or sulfur oxides reacting with water in the atmosphere, which will then produce acids. Okay, so we get sulfuric acid and nitric acid. Okay, and then this causes destruction of buildings and damage to waterways due to changing pH. If you think about limestone, marble, these kinds of things are made of calcium carbonate. When acid rain hits those, they react to produce salt, carbon dioxide, and water. So we see etching away of statues and other things that are exposed to acid rain. And of course, changing the pH of a waterway will drastically affect the biological environment of those organisms. So that's not great. So when we are talking about this, we need to take into consideration that human activities have changed the composition of our atmosphere dramatically over the past 200 years. This is an undeniable fact. These activities collectively have led to air pollution. This includes depletion of the ozone layer, the enhanced greenhouse effect due to increased greenhouse gases such as methane, CO2, and H2O, okay? Photochemical smog, which is your nitrogen dioxide primarily and other oxides, and then acid rain. Okay, looking at these, that now gives you enough information to have a look over the key questions in chapter 1.2. Hopefully you're able to make some good summary notes on this and feel confident in answering those discussion style questions on environmental impact and comparing fuels based on carbon neutrality, renewability, and sustainability, of which we'll practice some in class next time I see you.